ready to start the second session of this webinar, the success of Chinese policies in combating extremism in Xinjiang. And to chair the session, we have the honor of being in the company through Zoom, of course, virtually, Senator Nisar Memon, who is former Minister for Minister for Media Affairs, and he has also been on various committees. Currently, he is heading a committee on water and power, but today he will share his views after listening to you all. But first, I'll ask him to say a few words before we commence. Over to you, Senator.
Yes, certainly. It's my pleasure. In fact, I'm delighted to see that the session has started so well in the morning, and we had the panelists from Pakistan, and this is a very important subject. This is an important subject in the sense that it relates to the peace and development, not only in China or Xinjiang region, but in the entire world. I think we all are faced with, for a long time, with the terrorism, extremism, and extremism manifests itself in different forms, whether it is religious or otherwise. I think Pakistan has itself faced tremendously, and therefore we can understand this better. And I really think that the kind of panelists that we have, it covers the entire Pacific, from where Dave is there from New Zealand, then we have China. So covering the entire Pacific, Asia, Central Europe, and also to the America. I think this is a great opportunity for us to understand from each other. In fact, I was looking at the number of speakers, and I computed roughly that there is an experience of all of you as speakers. There's something like 100 years of experience of China that you people have. And this is what we like to hear in this webinar. And at the end, I'd like to make my comment. But first, I'd like to hear from you and also learn from you, because you people have really done a tremendous job in your area of understanding China and Xinjiang. With these words, I'd like to give floor to Group Captain Hari to commence the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We are looking for your supervision and guidance. So we will start the session with your permission. And the first speaker in this session is David Bromwich, who is from New Zealand. The sun always rises first from New Zealand, and we also commence the new year. The first country which enjoys the new year is New Zealand. So let's also hear the first words from New Zealand. David Bromwich is the head of the China and New Zealand Society on Friendship. He has made tremendous tours of China, and he is also an expert on the Chinese language. But more importantly, he is abreast of the current situation. Last year, he and I were on a tour of China together. So over to you, David. Let me not be between you and the people who would like to listen to you.
Thank you very much, Harley, and thank you for the honor of participating in this webinar. I think it's very important. I come as an Anglophile, and I feel that the fake news that we talked a little bit about earlier in the earlier session is very relevant to me, because it's really upsetting us in the West, because it seems to come from the West. I also acknowledge that we had our own very bad terrorist incident against Muslims in New Zealand in March last year, and that's something we need to stop globally. So to introduce myself briefly, I've been visiting China since 1991, and with a total of 50 visits, with an aggregated time spent in China of over 9 years. In this time, my key area of work has been in rural poverty alleviation and community development, targeting the poorer and undeveloped provinces in West China. In this work, I've had contact with many Chinese from diverse ethnic groups, from smallholder farmers through to provincial leaders. I've traveled extensively in China, including 3 visits to Xinjiang, one of which was with my friend here, Mr. Harley. I do not present myself as an academic. Rather, I rely on facts from my own experience working and traveling in China, from my friends and colleagues in China, and my extensive studies of China, her policies, and her people. I also need to make a disclaimer. I cannot claim to represent the views of the New Zealand-China Friendship Society or its members. What I have to say today is my personal opinion. As has been said, the topic of Xinjiang has become a very hot issue, with many sweeping accusations leveled by Western media and political commentators at the way the Chinese government has managed its affairs in the Uyghur Autonomous Region in recent years. China is accused of human rights abuses and cultural genocide, but many counter-arguments are also now emerging from within China and from some other international media that are more inclined to balanced reporting. News reports both misreport and deliberately disreport a range of issues. Much evidence given to support these claims lacks credibility through unbalanced selection of material to prove a theory, unprofessional lack of scrutiny of existing reports, or deliberate lies to mislead. Allegation unsupported by fact has become a disingenuous mode of propaganda, and writers of opinion pieces considered reputable appear content to parrot this misinformation. It is important that a balance is established to gain a true understanding of the real environment, what is actually happening on the ground, the causes of the problems, how it is being managed, and some outcomes from this process. Allow me to deconstruct current dialogue on the Xinjiang issue by presenting some facts and correcting some distortions of the truth. So firstly, on security issues in Xinjiang. Xinjiang has experienced many hundreds of terrorist attacks from 1990 through to 2016. These have been widespread in different cities and counties and have extended as far afield as an attack in Kunming railway station and Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Large numbers of people have been killed or seriously injured. These attacks have been indiscriminate, and victims have included men, women, and children, Han people, and members of other ethnic minority groups, including Uyghur. Given the interest in Xinjiang from Western media, the extent of these incidents has received little coverage, yet when reported to us, have been presented not as terrorist attacks, but as freedom fighters from frustrated minority groups. But real freedom fighters do not drive car bombs into crowded marketplaces. ITIM, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, is behind the attacks and is closely linked to other international terrorist organizations, including ISIS. ITIM has been designated as a terrorist organization by the United Nations and has avowed intent to separate Xinjiang from China. Its recruits come largely from disaffected youth who have been trained by outsiders, including members of the ISIS. A captured training video has proven this link, depicting dreadful content of the training, including how to make bombs, where to detonate with maximum destruction, and graphic depiction of how to execute victims. In any Western country, this would be stamped on severely, yet when it happens in Xinjiang, it appears to be of little interest to the West. Large numbers of these young men, trained to commit acts of terrorism, have been exported to other trouble spots in Afghanistan, Syria, and Turkey, thus contributing to global terrorism. In June 2019, 21 Western countries signed a letter sent to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, condemning China's human rights abuses in Xinjiang. But this was followed by a letter eventually signed by 51 countries stating that security had returned to Xinjiang and the fundamental human rights of people of all ethnic groups there had been safeguarded. This included Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and a number of other Muslim countries. While questioning what Muslim countries have to say about human rights abuses in Xinjiang, the clear response from the signatories of this letter has been dismissed as pandering to diplomatic debt to China in defense of China. This can surely not be true of Saudi Arabia, a friend of USA, but more importantly, a strong voice for the Muslim global community. The letter read, faced with the grave challenge of terrorism and extremism, China has undertaken a series of counter-terrorism and de-radicalization measures in Xinjiang, including up vocational education and training centers. In June 2019, the United States, Britain, and other Western countries objected to a visit by the United Nations counterterrorism chief to Xinjiang, concerned the visit would validate China's arguments that it was tackling terrorism. United States Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan spoke with the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres ahead of the trip to convey Washington's concerns because Beijing continues to paint its repressive campaign against Uyghurs and other Muslims as legitimate counterterrorism efforts when it is not. It seems then that the USA consider they can speak for Muslims in Xinjiang, but Saudi Arabia is disregarded and China's voice should not be heard. Since 2017, there have been no further terrorist attacks in Xinjiang, and the export of terrorists from Xinjiang has also ceased. A number of terrorists have been convicted and imprisoned. China has thus made a contribution to the global campaign to reduce terrorism, yet the Western reporting fails to recognize this, preferring to continue to attack China for human rights abuses against Uyghurs. Incidentally, a United Nations report states that in 2018, all countries except the USA have reported seeing a decrease in terrorist activity. With respect to the Xinjiang situation, the Chinese government statement on human rights is clear. All citizens have the right to live safely in a secure society and environment. Those who commit acts of terrorism have no right to freedom. On the reasons, China's research identify poverty as one of the key reasons why disaffected youth have been attracted to terrorist training camps. Some of the speakers this morning spoke of the lagging behind in Xinjiang of the development of other parts of China. And in particular, a poverty of opportunity. For many decades, the Chinese government has espoused policies to lift their vast rural population of people out of poverty all over China. In Xinjiang, it is no different. One policy unique to Xinjiang has been to offer those who have committed minor offences like petty theft or failure to send children to school the opportunity to attend vocational training schools instead of punishment. In these, 2 subjects are compulsory: to learn literacy in both local language and Chinese language, and their legal rights and obligations as Chinese citizens under the law. Therefore, the trainees can choose from a number of occupational courses leading to employment, which may, for example, include sewing, domestic help, tour guiding, and performance in their local culture. There is a stated 80% success rate for graduates to become employed, and many have set up their own small enterprises. These vocational centres are called internment camps by the West, and numbers between 1 and 2 million have been cited as the numbers interned. The BBC have even compared them to Nazi Germany. But these numbers need closer examination. They come initially from 2 sources. Firstly, a survey conducted by the World Uyghur Congress, a group of exiled Uyghurs living outside China. They are linked to the group Chinese Defenders for Democracy and supported by the US government-funded National Endowment for Democracy. Their figures come from interviews with 8 people in Xinjiang, which were then extrapolated for the whole Xinjiang autonomous region. The misinformation on internment camps comes from anecdotal evidence through these same sources. Secondly, the Western interpretation of these camps and the numbers in them is reinforced by a German anthropologist, Adrian Zenz. He is a senior fellow in China Studies at the far-right Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, which was established by the United States government in 1983. He is a far-right fundamental Christian whose avowed objective is to attack the Chinese government with separatist intent in the Western border regions. Zenz also arrived at his estimate of over 1 million in a dubious manner. He based it on a single report by Istiklal TV, a Uyghur exile media organization based in Turkey, which was republished by Newsweek Japan. Far from being an impartial journalistic organization, Istiklal TV advances the separatist cause while playing host to an assortment of extremist figures. Yet Zenz has been accepted as an authority on China's abuse of Uyghur rights without scrutiny by most Western media. While Zenz alleges that he is undergoing character assassination, his credibility is unchallenged by Western media sources, who have failed to present a suitable analyst who does have untarnished credibility. It does no credit to the critics of China to use the speculative and non-credible sources to make claims. The numbers in the education camps or internment camps are unproven, nor has what happens in these camps been adequately verified by either side of the argument. From my experience of China's support for minority groups and my travels in Xinjiang, I am receptive to the Chinese explanation. Western media are very ready to use evidence that is not validated. A satellite of a barren walled enclosure, a satellite photo of a barren walled enclosure in the desert is presented as proof of a prison camp. A video of shaved-headed men being herded onto a train is not verified in a BBC interview when confronting the Chinese ambassador to Britain. The blue uniform of the prisoners has now been identified as that of a prison in Kashgar, and the prisoners as convicted criminals, perhaps convicted terrorists. But this does not prove abuse of the rights of law-abiding Uyghurs. In March 2008, in the build-up to the Beijing Olympic Games, CNN posted a photo of the PLA bearing down on a group of Tibetans in Lhasa to present an image of Chinese oppression in Tibet. It was quickly found to have been cropped to serve this purpose, and CNN had to admit this. Use of unverified photos in Xinjiang follows the same unscrupulous process of deliberate misrepresentation. Many anecdotal voices from Uyghurs in exile claiming they have lost contact with relatives are systematically being checked in Xinjiang. Many are found to be living happily, and their claims discredited. Some have shown the person in prison, while other checks cannot be completed because there is insufficient verifiable details provided by self-exiled claimants to locate the disappeared individuals. Sorry, can somebody mute that, please? It's coming over the top of my talking. Right? It's distracting. The number of mosques in Xinjiang is now 1 for every 530 people, although I heard this morning the figure of 1 for 350. Of course, not all of these anecdotal accusations can be immediately responded to, but there is enough evidence to show that at least a number of the claims are based on false statements, often to the dismay of the family members in Xinjiang implicated in tales of their or their family members' disappearance. The Uyghur population in Xinjiang has increased from 1978 from less than 6 million to almost 12 million today. This shows a significant increase and does not support the allegation that the Chinese government is trying to eliminate them. As in all of China, since 1978, there has been a birth control policy restricting Han ethnic group to 1 birth, and most other groups to 2 births per family. Some groups, like Tibetans, were allowed up to 4 births. Any births over these numbers are punished in various ways, including fines for all groups, including Han, not solely targeting Uyghurs. And I think that answers a question this morning. My understanding is that the Uyghurs, like most other minority groups, were allowed 2 births in that period of restricted births. Throughout the 18 years that I've worked in poverty reduction in China, I've known of the policy of assisting in poor areas, especially poorer rural areas, to migrate to cities and industrial areas to find work. While many have chosen urban migration as an option, others have accepted assistance to move to find employment. This mass movement of people is represented in the rural-urban population balance, shifting from around 80-20 to 50-50. This balance is very typical of a developing industrializing country. The policy has been offered to all Chinese with limited employment opportunity, be they Han or members of the other 55 ethnic minority groups. Some Uyghurs have also accepted this move and migrated to the east. Henan is one province where there is a substantial population of Uyghurs living and working thousands of kilometers from home. The claims made by reports from outside China that the migration of Uyghurs is an insidious form of weakening their ethnic strength display an abysmal ignorance about Chinese realities, and the huge effort required to bring this vast and ancient nation into the modern world with livelihoods appropriate to a moderately prosperous society. Cultural genocide is another term being used to discredit China's policy in Xinjiang. It was earlier a Western tool to dismiss China's attitude to the development of Tibet. The focus of this program of attack on China has now swung towards Xinjiang. Chinese policy has always been to support ethnic minority groups and has moved to protect the safety and cultural diversity of the 12 groups in Xinjiang, as well as the Han. Human rights in China over the last 7 decades addressed the issue of poverty. Here, the three key rights of subsistence: enough food, adequate shelter, and provision of education for 1.4 billion people have been noted by Nobel Prize-winning economists as major achievements of the Chinese government. The goal to eliminate extreme poverty by the end of 2020 remains on track, despite COVID-19 and historically large floods this year. The practice of Islam. Islam is the dominant religion of the Uyghur and the other ethnic groups in Xinjiang. I defer to my colleague, Mr. Harley, for comments as a practicing Muslim and other members of the panel, except to pass my observations that Islam is practiced. I've witnessed men at prayer. Uyghurs are allowed to grow beards. The Quran is not banned. And here I just want to respond to a question from the earlier panel on religious freedom in China. Last July, I was in Kanding, which is the capital of the Tibetan autonomous region of Ganza. And within 3 kilometers where I was staying, there was 1 mosque, 2 churches, and 2 Buddhist temples. And it was there that I read the news that United States Secretary of State Pompeo said that China is disallowing religious practice in China. And I couldn't understand whether he was totally ignorant or just totally mischievous. In summary, 2 statements I feel need to be appreciated and respected to receive the truth about Xinjiang. Terrorism and jihad is not part of the Islam religion, any more than violence committed by Christian extremist groups is part of Christianity. Eliminating terrorism is an essential duty for any modern government. The Western propaganda against China and Xinjiang needs to be taken for what it is: propaganda. China's defense of policy relating to Xinjiang needs to be better received, and the voice of law-abiding Uyghurs in Xinjiang needs to be at the center of human rights and development discourse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. It was very enlightening, and I'm sure we have all learned a lot from your personal experience and your very vivid thoughts on this subject. I will now request Professor Chu Rong, who is more a professor and less a journalist, but is a very close friend of Pakistan. He has spent over 10 years over here, made many friends and many admirers. But today he's going to talk about the success of the Chinese policies in Xinjiang in combating extremism, terrorism, and separatism. Over to you, Professor Chu.
Oh, thank you, Excellency Harley. It's my great honor just to stay together to have certain kind of Zoom meeting with our Pakistani friends as well as the international participants. Just now, I heard very attentively about the about the chairman, Dave Bromwich. Is that right?
Okay.
That's right.
Dave Bromwich, Mr. Dave Bromwich's speech. I was really very encouraged because I think it's the first time for me through this kind of Zoom meeting to hear very objective, very justice analysis on the current Xinjiang situation. And it's also my honor just to stay together with Honorable Distinguished Excellency Mr. Man Meng, who used to be the Minister of Pakistan long time ago, whom we stayed together at least a couple of times. And at last he held the reception for the Chinese and the foreign journalists. I still remember them. I'm also very happy to see Mr. Zemir Awang, who is also the Chinese friendly friend. Always he speaks very good Chinese, and he still have the strong links with China. He used to be scientific science counselor in Chinese embassy, I think 15 or maybe 20 years ago. So Mr. Hardy, we all know that he contributed greatly to Sino-Pakistan friendship. Not only just talk, not like some other people talk something about slogan, higher than Himalaya mountain, deeper than in the ocean, sweeter than honey. He also did a lot of concrete work to contribute this kind of friendship. And because a lot of Chinese people knows Mr. Hardy, because we know him as an author, as a writer, as a Chinese, what do we say, civilian ambassador in China from Pakistan. So I would like to, I fully agree to the point of view of Mr. Dave Bromwich. I would like to talk something about Xinjiang social political stability. And my point of view is it can't be undermined for such kind of valuable social and political stability. Let's talk something about the Xinjiang situation. First, let's say something about Xinjiang now has been persisting the construction of ecological civilization as a major task, a major livelihood project, a major development issue, and strive to build a beautiful Xinjiang autonomous region with blue sky and green water. That is to say, to establish the ecological friendly province. Xinjiang is now formally establishing the concept of green water and green mountains, as we often metaphor the concept as a golden and silver nature. Xinjiang has been insisting on ecological priority and people-friendly economy so as to serve the people in high quality and protect and to make solidity of development. The purpose of it is to make complement which is other, to make prosperous life and to follow ecologically sound, civilized development paths. Xinjiang now is strictly observing the bottom line of the ecological red line. Insist on protecting environment development. In order to do this, Xinjiang is right now implementing the most stringent ecological protection system and the space use control system, and most stringent water resources management system so as to prevent environmental pollution from the source and to promote formation of a green development way and lifestyle. Xinjiang is trying to fight the tough battle of pollution prevention and control, improve the ability and the level of environment governance, strengthen pollution prevention and control monitoring. I have been to Xinjiang every year since 2016, so I can see Xinjiang is changing year by year, month by month. Xinjiang has been strengthening ecologically environment law enforcement, trying to accelerate the construction of environmental emergency capacity system, and resolutely fighting the battle of blue sky, clear water, and unpolluted land, and improve the rural human settlement environment. And we all know that China, in Chinese history, we have the patriotic health movement. Right now, this patriotic health movement is organically combined to continuously meet people's growing need for a beautiful ecological environment. As far as I'm concerned, it is now necessary to strengthen ecological protection and restoration, and to coordinate management of landscape, forests, fields, lakes, and grasses, to insist on giving priority to conservation, protection, and natural restoration, to vigorously promote and practice Xinjiang spirit, to accelerate the promotion of major ecological projects, to do it year after year. And of course, Xinjiang needs to continue to work from generation to generation to make a green a new universal form. It is necessary to strengthen Xinjiang's leadership to implement the responsibility. Government in Xinjiang at all levels should show their political responsibility and implement the main responsibility. All relevant departments yet should coordinate and work together to build a beautiful Xinjiang. The government of the country has realized that the coordinated development of the economy and society with the population, resources, and environment closely follow the goal and the task of building a well-off society in all around the way. Focus on overall goals of social stability and long-term stability. Xinjiang should not relax to normalize the prevention and control of the pandemics, should continuously adhere to the general tone of the work of seeking progress while maintaining stability. Xinjiang's government now is implementing the new development concept, deepening the market reform, expanding high-level opening up to the outside world, including our iron friend Pakistan, and promoting high-quality economic development, resolutely fighting the war of annihilation of deep poverty, completing poverty alleviation goals and tasks within high quality as a schedule within this year. Focusing on overall goal, adhering effective stability maintenance measures, and resolutely maintaining the harmony and the stability of all over society. Another important phenomenon is that application of new Xinjiang big data and the digital production of smart factories have completed, subverted the traditional labor-intensive production model and can effectively control the quality of products in the production process and prevent quality accidents. Currently, Xinjiang's digital economy is accelerating its expansion into the production field. New production model and new business formats represented by the industrial internet and the intelligent manufacturing are constantly emerging, driving technological innovation, promoting industrial upgrading, and helping enterprises to transform. Xinjiang has established a wind power smart operation system, developed and applied a series of information platforms, collected, transmitted, and analyzed the wind farm operation data information, and generated a smart operation and maintenance service support platform with functions such as intelligence analysis, fault warning, expert support, and knowledge sharing. In recent years, Xinjiang has continue to carry out the digital and informatization smart demonstration project, such as smart power plant and smart mines around the new infrastructure area, such as data centers and industrial internet. The digital industry is deeply empowered traditional industry, improving the efficiency of resource allocation and making high quality development more satisfactory to the need of Xinjiang people. The digital economy The digital economy is a new economic revolution. In recent years, Xinjiang has embraced internet technology, which has not only cultivated and strengthened a number of digital economic enterprises, but also accelerated
Yes, Professor Chu.
Yeah, I'll continue. Sorry. Wait.
Okay, we are waiting for you.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, let me continue. And not only that, but also smart city, smart healthcare, smart transportation, and smart government affairs. The second phase of the Urumqi Cloud Computing Center project has already started. After completion of the project, it will have the ability to provide a data storage, analysis, and the processing service for more than 500 government units, scientific research institutions, and small and medium-sized enterprises, forming a cloud computer big data industry chain of more than 10 billion RMB yuan. This year, Xinjiang will continue to promote the construction of new infrastructure, accelerate the construction of 5G network, continuously improve the supporting capacity of the software and the information technology service industry, promote the research and application of new technologies such as the blockchain, cloud computing, big data, and artificial intelligence, and improve the government. The degree of informatization of management and public service will enhance the availability of the digital economy market entity, such as regulated enterprises, small and medium-sized enterprises, and the intermediary organization, and the intermediary organization, promote the development of net economy, platform economy, and the sharing economy, cultivate the construction of the modern industrial system with a Xinjiang characteristic, and enhance the development level of the digital economy. Yes, in the first half of the year, Xinjiang has made a breakthrough in accelerating construction of key opening up platforms such as one port, two zones, and the port economic belt to further enhance the level of foreign economic and trade cooperation. In the first half of 2020, 34 key construction projects started construction, including the railway port business and the trade zone and the international express mail center in the one port Urumqi International Land Port District, with the investment of 1.286 billion yuan completed. The relevant department of the autonomous region strengthened the overall coordination and adopt various measures. They now actively support the operation of Urumqi, Tashkent, Urumqi, Russia, Urumqi, Europe fine line, and support the recovery growth of China-Europe line. In accordance with the development concept of collecting goods, building park, and gathering industry, 4 measures were taken to promote construction of dry port area in the first half of this year. The first is to promote the improvement of the quality of freight train. The second is to accelerate construction of the park. The third is to accelerate the industrial agglomeration and efficiency. And the fourth is to promote the enhancement of platform functions. In terms of the platform function enhancement, the land port area tracked and promoted the application for construction of bounded logistic centers and designated supervision site for grain of import. At the end of May, it realized the first online shopping bounded import test in Xinjiang. It promoted the country's first cross-border trade. Electronics and the business plus TIR, International Road Transport Supervision Model, was a successful testing. And the 2 districts of Horgos Economic Development Zone and the Kashgar Economic Development Zone, I suppose Mr. Hardy has been visited these 2 places, now are actively implemented the autonomous regions, the overall planning of pandemic prevention and control and economic social development measures. And many economic indicators have stabilized and improved. In the first half of the year, the Horgos Economic Development Zone achieved a generally public budget revenue of 1.605 billion RMB yuan. I think something about the 225 million US dollars, increase of 7.7%, completed fixed asset investment of 5.116 billion RMB yuan, and increased 82.7%. Okay, I don't want to just mention too much about the figures. Okay, let me continue. In addition, Xinjiang now is accelerating the preparation of the Port Economic Belt Development Plan and will soon organize export review, accelerate the progress of construction of Yining Airport, and promote the preparation for acceptance, actively promote the temporary opening Turfan Airport. On May 14 of 2020, the Horgos Chinese medicine import export port, cosmetic import and export port, and the drug export port were officially inaugurated, making Horgos becoming the port city with the largest number of the functioning ports and the most complete variety in Xinjiang. Horgos is very close to Kazakhstan, so that is a very important land port for China. Hopefully, Kazakhstan can function the same in the future. Yes, Xinjiang is actively carrying out various tasks to stabilize the foreign trade and the foreign investment. Urumqi cross-border e-commerce comprehensive pilot zone was officially approved. A cross-border e-commerce comprehensive service platform completed online construction. And Tachang City was included the first batch of the pilot countries and the city for the processing imported goods in frontier mutual trade fair. And the free trade was replicated and promoted throughout the district. There are 119 pilot reform experiences in the pilot room. Finally, let's talk something about the counter-pandemic measures in Xinjiang. Yeah, that is from 0 hour to 24 hours of July 15. on August 11, yeah, from July 15 to August 11, a total of 263 confirmed cases were cured and discharged from hospital in Urumqi, and 89 cases of asymptomatic infection were released from medical observation, bringing the total to 352 cases. As of 24 hours on August 11, the city has 532 confirmed cases and 130 asymptomatic infection. The number of newly confirmed cases fell to single digits for the first time since July 22. The total number of confirmed cases cured and discharged from hospital in a single day, and the number of confirmed cases treated in the hospital and asymptomatic infection and medical observation continue to decline. Yes, finally, Xinjiang also enjoyed greatly support from the country. The State Council expert team on joint prevention and control mechanism for the new pandemic and medical staff of the autonomous region will further strengthen the analysis of discharge cases, summarizes an optimized diagnosis treatment plan, provide experiences and technical support for follow-up treatment, and they continuously improve the cure rate. One is carefully analyzed and judge the expiring centralized medical observation personnel, determine the list of the personnel 24 to 48 hours in advance according to the condition for releasing the centralized medical observation. Yes, now Xinjiang, we can say, is progressing day by day. It's going to welcome the better tomorrow. But the relevant US Congress bill and some US politicians groundlessly accuse China's Xinjiang human rights situation and China's Xinjiang's policy, verify China's counterterrorism and de-radicalization measures, and seriously interfere in China's internal affairs. I should say we express strong dissatisfaction and resolute opposition against US behavior. Xinjiang-related issues are not human rights, ethnic, or religious issue at all, but on counter-terrorism and counter-separatist issue. The series of measures taken by the Chinese government to govern Xinjiang are generally supported by the people of all ethnic groups in Xinjiang, and have also received a positive comment from the international community. The US government making far a fuss about Xinjiang-related issues completely violate objective facts and a series of violate the basic norm of international relations. Further expose is the double standard on counter-terrorism issue and its sinister intention to interfere in China's internal affairs. Xinjiang's affairs are purely China's internal affairs, and no foreign interference is permitted. The US should immediately correct its mistake and stop using Xinjiang-related issues to interfere in China's internal affairs and not go further and further down the wrong path. Yes, I'm sorry, my English is limited, so I just try my best to express my point of view. Hopefully, thanks to everybody patient, hopefully you understand my point of view. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mameng, as well as thank you, Mr. Hart.
Thank you so much, Professor Chu. It was very refreshing to listen firsthand the opinion of a Chinese academic. Of course, this was not the opinion of the Chinese government or the Communist Party of China, but a person who is independent of thought and who is an academic. Thank you, Professor Chu. So we now move on to Paris, where Christine Beer joins us. Christine, by the way, is the editor-in-chief of the monthly French magazine Nouvelle Solidarité, as well as she's the head of the China chair at the Schiller Institute. Unfortunately, she is suffering from laryngitis and will not be able to read her paper in person. She has sent it to me and I'll read it on her behalf with your permission, Christine.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Okay. Her paper is titled Xinjiang, Economic Development to Eradicate Terrorism. She says, first, I want to thank Mr. Hali for inviting me to present a paper on Xinjiang at this webinar. Well, thank you, Christine, for acknowledging me. She says, we both were part of a most instructive tour in China in July 2019, which took us to the Ganan Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture in the Gansu province and to the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, the aim of which was to become acquainted with China's policies towards ethnic and religious minorities. The context was the wild accusations that China had imprisoned millions of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. A first letter, which was mentioned by Dave Bromwich also, inspired by the US and signed by 22 countries, had been sent that month to the UN calling for a full-fledged investigation. Days later, while we were traveling in China, 34 other countries sent their own letter rebuking the first one and fully supporting China's anti-terrorist policies in the Xinjiang. Since then, the crescendo in accusations has reached nearly pre-war levels, China being accused of using the Uyghurs as forced labor and even of engaging in mass sterilization of the Uyghur women. Who can believe those accusations, which come essentially from the US Secretary of State, Mike Armageddon Pompeo? In a speech given to students at the Texas A&M University campus on April 15, 2019, Pompeo himself confessed that when he was director at the CIA between 2017 and 18, we lied, we cheated, and we stole, thus violating the motto of the West Point cadets. How to believe such accusations from a country notorious for its use of prisoner labor paid for peanuts in private prisons listed on the Wall Street? What we saw during this trip ran totally contrary to such accusations. At the institutes of Tibetology and of the borderline provinces in Beijing, we were presented with China's self-conception as a unified but multi-ethnic and multi-religious state. To this effect, 5 autonomous regions and 30 autonomous prefectures have been created where these groups benefit from advantages relative to the Han, such as favorable quotas to access public schools and jobs. They were also exempted of the one-child policy. In this context, as we were able to see in both Gansu and Xinjiang, the cultural patrimony of those 56 different ethnic groups is highly protected, just as their religious practice, on condition that such activities have nothing to do with separatism, terrorism, or religious extremism. The Quran, the Bible, and other religious books are made accessible to all via libraries and internet, and 20 million Muslims practice in 39,000 clean and modern mosques cared for by the state, of which 25,000 in Xinjiang, and some have 100, and there are 100 million Christians and a similar number of Buddhists. At these same institutes, we also learn that for the Chinese government, the key to winning the war against terrorism, religious extremism, and separatism is economic development. We must eliminate the ground which allows extremist groups to recruit people, and that ground is poverty, hammered the president of the Institute of the Borderline States. Christine goes on to say that not only is the Chinese government not trying to eliminate the Uyghur minority, but it has launched policies that will bring development to the Xinjiang and more generally to the western part of China, creating therefore the basis for solving the complicated social problems of poverty and ethnic integration manipulated by the enemies of China in the West since back in the early 90s. This was the Going West policy adopted for the first time in 1999, aimed at reducing the disequilibrium between the western provinces of China, which had lagged far behind the maritime provinces in terms of living standards through a dirigistic investment policy to develop industrial production and infrastructure. This policy has been renewed several times since. In 2010, a year after the riots in Urumqi, an important plan was initiated in the Xinjiang province alone, aimed at transforming its rich base of raw materials, oil, gas, coal, uranium, gold, lead, platinum, etc., into a real economic force, along with agriculture, cotton, fruits, and tourism. The plan called for improvements in infrastructure and public services. In 2013, President Xi Jinping brought this policy leap forward with the launching of the Belt and Road Initiative, which made the Xinjiang province with its borders to 8 nations, Russia, Mongolia, India, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, the outpost to the Eurasian continent. These policies have led to a massive development of infrastructure. As we write, we learn that finally all of Xinjiang has access to clean water. In terms of transports, an expressway was built between Beijing and Urumqi, capital of Xinjiang, as well as a TGV from Lanzhou, Xinjiang. Excellent and extended modern road systems have been developed in Gansu and Xinjiang in particular, creating the basis for a vast improvement of tourism and trade. In Xinjiang alone, since 2013, 111 roads were built connecting to 5 neighboring countries. 3 other railways are in construction and 30 airports will be ready by 2022. Digital facilities throughout the country and payment by phones have vastly increased the e-commerce and opened direct markets between producers and consumers throughout China. According to a report published by the Bureau of Information of the Chinese State Council Affairs, the GDP in Xinjiang grew by 8.3% as a yearly average between 1952 and 2018. The average GDP per capita yearly growth was of 5.7% during the same period. The region is today leading in China in the area of agricultural mechanization and efficient irrigation for water conservation. In that context, all parts of Xinjiang, the rich north with its Han majority, just as the poor south populated by Uyghurs, are benefiting from the growth. In 2017, according to Professor Gao Jianling of the Xinjiang Academy of Social Sciences, 470,000 jobs were created in the urban areas and 2.7 million in the rural zones. The per capita revenue in 2017 compared to 2016 was 30,775 yuans in the urban areas and 11,045 yuans in the rural area. That is 10.1% growth in the urban areas and of 9.9% in the rural areas. As one can see, it is this difference which subsists in living standards between the south and the richer areas in the north that the government will have to work on in order to eliminate ethnic tensions totally, having resulted from a rapid growth of the Han population in the territory, which used to be populated essentially by Uyghurs, a difference which is based on the higher level of competence of the Hans. The targeted policies of the government towards the 4 prefectures of the south of Xinjiang have also shown very good results. From 2014 to 2018, 2.31 million people, among which 1.89 million from the south of Xinjiang, were lifted out of poverty. And the improvement of the level of subsistence is due to the continuous reinforcement of 9 programs of social protection directed towards employment, education, medical services, and social assistance. To conclude, where in the West are efforts of that dimension being carried out to uplift the level of a poor population? Well done, Christine. That was a very comprehensive paper, and I must thank you for your contribution. Now we shall move over to William Jones in the USA.
Yes, I'm the Washington bureau chief of the Executive Intelligence Review magazine, and over the last 20 years or so, I've had a kind of a China portfolio, and have been there many times, and was in Urumqi a couple of years ago for a very short time. And I'm very happy to address this forum here, all these eminent scholars and some old friends who are here to speak about a topic which is, of course, very important because of the rantings coming out of the U.S. State Department and elsewhere with regard to Xinjiang, which I think have to be corrected significantly. I have also a few video things, and I'm going to try and work it from my computer here, but I'm not really so into Zoom, so I may make some mistakes. I may have to turn to Mr. Hali, who has a copy of the video as well, to show it. But I will try and get to that when we come to it. Just a few comments on this, more of a historical issue. The vast sweep of central Eurasia, with its large expanses of mountains and deserts, for many centuries had been regarded as something of a backwater of civilization, squeezed between the advancing nations of Europe on the one hand and Russia, and on the other, the East Asian nations. The way of life was slow and difficult, and often disturbed by the vagaries of climate, as well as the movements of the encroaching colonial powers as they played the great game of control in the region. This had not always been the case. At the beginning of the last millennium, the region served as the crossroads of culture. China, a largely agricultural society, was at the time more developed than the European countries. There really weren't countries even at the time. Indeed, China's four great inventions, the compass, gunpowder, printing, and paper making, were transmitted along the great trade route of the ancient Silk Road to Europe and the West, which ran through today's Xinjiang and Central Asia, laying the basis for the development of European culture. And it was China's desire during the Han Dynasty to find allies in the West against the incursions of the Xiongnu tribes, which occasionally devastated the country, that led to the first attempts to open up that route. And while it was a transmission belt for Chinese silk and other commodities, it was also a transmission belt for ideas, and served as the paradigm of what we call today a dialogue of civilizations. If I can, let me see if I can get the first diagram here. Okay, there we go. Okay, first one.
Okay, next.
Okay, next to the next, that one, yeah. This is actually young scholars learning about astronomy along the Silk Road, probably somewhere in Samarkand. I'm not sure exactly the stop. This is what the Silk Road was all about. During the course, okay, that's the first one. I'll get back to the second one in a minute. During the course of the 19th century, the region was subject to great turmoil, becoming the setting for the great game of the colonial powers. Three main countries were involved in this: Russia, Great Britain, and China. In reality, the great game was largely fought out between Great Britain and Russia, the two nations that wished to assert hegemony over the region. But by the end of World War II, the British Empire was fading, although British imperial designs perhaps have never entirely faded, and have unfortunately been taken up by some political circles here in the United States as well. During the post-war settlement, China, which had suzerainty over Xinjiang on and off since the Han Dynasty, remained in control of Xinjiang as the Soviet Union abandoned any claims to the region. At the time, it probably didn't appear to be very advantageous to the inhabitants of Xinjiang, which comprised a population of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and dozens of other ethnic groups. At the end of the civil war in China, the People's Liberation Army entered Xinjiang. And while a poor developing country, China in 1954 created the Xinjiang Construction and Engineering Corps, a semi-military organization with great engineering capabilities, similar to the Army Corps of Engineers here in the United States, which also had duties on the Western frontier. Part of their purpose was to protect the borders, but the XPCC, as it's known as, the cadre, was also focused on seriously building up the region with a prime emphasis on developing Xinjiang's agriculture. With the reform and opening up in 1979, Chinese development started to take off. While initially entering the world economy as a low-wage manufacturer, China used that position to leapfrog to higher levels of productivity by emphasizing scientific and technological development. This policy ultimately paid off with the beginnings of a well-off society, particularly in the coastal regions, the heart of Chinese manufacturing export at the time. While these developments may not have immediately alleviated to any great extent the situation in Xinjiang, which was a more impoverished region in China's west, the egalitarian thrust of the Communist Party could not long permit growing disparities between the increasing wealth in the west, in the east, and the widespread poverty in the western regions. This led the Chinese government to initiate its Western development policy, which became official policy in the year 2000, but which had already been at work prior to that. This was aimed at bringing economic development and the improvement of the conditions of life of the people to the Western regions, including, most importantly, to Xinjiang. The realization of this development depended on creating greater connectivity between the eastern coastal regions and the landlocked western regions. In that respect, there was an emphasis on the development of the railroad. In line with the Chinese proverb, if you want prosperity, build a road, China started to focus on this important rail connectivity. With the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989, part of the border to what had been the Soviet Union was now a border with several other countries, including an independent Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan had already built a rail connection to Xinjiang in 1990, establishing the first direct rail links and increased trade between China and Central Asia. As China completed its own railroad to Xinjiang, this opened up trade between all of China, Central Asia, and to all of Europe. And if you go to the second slide, please.
Second slide.
The railroad, this is one of the earlier ones, but connecting Xinjiang with Kazakhstan. This was the origin of what became known as the Eurasian Land Bridge, the first east-west rail connection from the Atlantic to the Pacific since the creation of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Around the same period of time, the projections for such a land bridge were being considered by economist and statesman Lyndon LaRouche and his wife Helga Zepp LaRouche. Next picture, please. There they are. With the fall of the Soviet Union, the LaRouches had developed the concept of a productive triangle in Europe, going from Berlin to Vienna to Paris, which could be developed as an integrated production and export center for the world community, and in particular would serve to integrate the economies of East Germany and the Eastern European countries by raising the level of productivity there, rather than shutting down the industries, which to a large extent happened at the time. It was an attempt to integrate the less productive capabilities of Eastern Europe and East Germany into an overall program of development for all of Europe. By 1991, this program had been expanded to include the development of transcontinental rail corridors, which were spiraling from productive triangle region into Central, East, and South Asia. Next slide, please. This is the map that was a part of the LaRouche program in 1992 of building this Eurasia land bridge idea. A series of conferences and discussions between the LaRouche people and Russian and Chinese friends led to the proposal for China to hold a conference on this proposal and to make it into a big thing. For those involved, this was not simply a matter of a mere transportation grid, but rather a system of connectivity that would transform the entire shape of the Eurasian continent and the world. Such a project of infrastructural investment would provide for the developing countries along its route a way out of the straitjacket of the increasingly speculative and crisis-ridden New York-London financial system, which had become for them a debt trap, and this would provide a way forward. While the Chinese government was willing to hold a conference on the Eurasian land bridge at the beginning in discussions around 1993-94, already then called the New Silk Road, they were keen on having the participation of the European nations. But initially, the European Commission, which was the forerunner to the EU, which had become a grand arbiter of European policy, was simply not enthusiastic about this project. So more discussions went on, but by 1995, they had at least agreed to send a representative, that is the European Commission, to a Beijing conference. So in 1996, the conference was held under the auspices of the Chinese Ministry for Science and Technology, with the participation of Mrs. LaRouche, as well as with the attendance of the rather non-committal Leon Britton, who was the head of the European Commission. Next slide, please. This is the end of the conference. This was at the time, 1996. It was not in Beijing. This was at the end of the Eurasian land bridge in Xinjiang, which Mrs. LaRouche was able to visit after attending the conference. The project began to bring prosperity to the Western region with an increase, including Xinjiang, with an tremendous increase in foreign investment. But when President Xi Jinping in 2013 made his famous announcement about the Silk Road Economic Belt as the #1 policy for the Chinese government, it was clear that this project would henceforth be on the fast track. Next slide, please. There he is at Nazarbayev University, 2013. The effect on the economy of Xinjiang has been breathtaking. The capital city of Urumqi has been named a core region of the Belt and Road Initiative. And anyone who has traveled recently to Urumqi has found a booming metropolis. Next slide, please. Hopefully this is what, there you go. Already, as Christine had pointed out, numerous routes have been set up connecting Xinjiang with the 5 neighboring countries. And one of the main lines of the original Eurasian land bridge connecting China with Western Europe runs through the Urumqi Railroad Hub. Next slide, please. There you got the Urumqi Hub. Kashgar is a main hub connecting to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. As reported in 2019, over 925 kilometers of railroad have been built, and 2013 kilometers are under construction. And Christine had mentioned the airports in Xinjiang. Like many other regions in China, Xinjiang is also subject of poverty alleviation, particularly in the south. Numerous projects have been taken up, and Christine pointed out many of these, including the Taklamakan Desert. They've brought a highway through there, and I think there are also plans for a railroad. Then you have the education centers, which have been a key element in educating people, especially in Chinese language skills. And of course, this gives them such an opportunity now that development is blooming. It's very important for those who want to be a part of this and to really take part of it, also have the knowledge of the Chinese language as well as the Uyghur language. And this they are getting in the education centers. and let's be clear that the chaos that has been created in the Middle East and Afghanistan by U.S. policy, whether it was Zbigniew Brzezinski's war in support of the Mujahideen against the Soviet Union, or George Bush's foolish war in Iraq, the entire region has suffered from this terrorism, including Xinjiang, where radical elements have been recruited to fight in Syria, to fight in Afghanistan, and gain training and gain experience, and be able to come back and bring this devastation to their homeland. The necessary measures to combat this by the Chinese government prevented Xinjiang from becoming another Afghanistan, and the world should be grateful for that. But the general thrust of what we're seeing is clear. The initiation of the Belt and Road Initiative has opened up new possibilities for global development, not based on the West's bankrupt shareholder value, but on the notion of the people's livelihood. As some in the West are intent on maintaining Western control over the economic rules of the road, rules which in fact have hindered the economic development of Asia and Africa and have led to economic setbacks in Latin America, the new dynamic introduced by the Belt and Road Initiative would represent a new paradigm of development, a paradigm that clearly asserts the equality of nations both big and small. And China was the one to raise this important issue because of its own history and its own traditions. This desperate attempt to launch a new Cold War in order to build a new Iron Curtain around China and Russia, for that matter, which certain Anglo-American circles are trying to accomplish, is doomed to failure. The nations of the world will not accept a return to business as usual, and the disastrous conditions of the world economy left by the still unresolved 2008 financial crisis, when on top of the COVID crisis, when they have seen the possibilities opened up by the BRI, they will not proceed in the old road as we had it, business as usual. Even the developed nations of Europe have benefited greatly by the new opportunities presented by their collaboration with the BRI, without a doubt. And the United States itself, with China as its major trading partner, would benefit immensely from the policy if they would put aside their lame-brained but dangerous attempts to assert some alleged prerogative as some sort of imperial power authorized to unilaterally determine the rules by which mankind must live, and instead work with China to develop the type of rules that would be beneficial to the populations of the world. Thank you very much for listening.
Right, Bill, it was like a whiff of fresh air coming from the United States of America, and we really appreciate your views because they were coming from the heart. Now, we've heard views across the globe, from New Zealand to China to France, and now the United States of America. And Senator Nazar Memon, if you permit, we will start the question and answer session.
Please go ahead.
Okay, the first question appears to be from Mr. Salman Iqbal, and this is contrary to what Professor Chu, you had said. He asks that some Chinese Muslims have reported that the Uyghurs in Xinjiang were discriminated against during the attack by COVID-19, the coronavirus. And he says this is very pathetic if true. So Professor Chu, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I think Chinese government is paying more attention to Uyghur people rather than to some other ethnic groups, especially Han people, because they really think Uyghur people's life are very valuable. They pay more attention, do more care and treatment toward the Uyghur people. I think that is a propaganda from the West media, as well as the rumors made and a conspiracy from them. Actually, the fact is just the opposite against that. So we can say that in the future, Chinese government may do more attention to our Uyghur people, even more better treatment than to the Han people, because we really think equality of each ethnic group and the equality and the solidarity of Xinjiang people are very important. To have Uyghur people means to have Chinese nationality, not only to have Han people. So that I don't agree to that kind of point of view, which I think is what we say. The point of view is polluted by the West media. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Nisar Memon, would you like to add something to it?
I think this has been responded already, but let's look at the facts. China went into the difficulty earlier. It was the first country which suffered a lot, but please remember that it was the first country because of the systems they have placed, because of their leadership taking the challenge and fighting it out in the manner that they came out first. They were the first one to come out. Not only that, but China went out of the way to why they were still fighting out the COVID in their country. They, based on their experience, they went out to support other countries, not that Pakistan, but many other countries, and in Europe and even to the United States of America. We have seen the number of states, they also requested China, and Chinese government responded. So I think China has been very active in engaging on every front, may it be the development, or may it be the natural disaster, or the diseases like pandemic that has come in. I think China has done pretty well, and I think we should recognize it. The only problem is that when people or the countries are successful, then I think they also expect that there will be some negativism. And that is what China is facing. And I think China is bravely facing. They're facing it with courage, and they're facing it with honor, I think, with dignity. And that is the way to deal in the international relationship, to bring peace to the world. Because what all of us are looking for, no matter small or big country, developed or underdeveloped or developing country, we're all looking to look inward and develop our own people, look after our own problems, and have a cooperation, not only for the region, but now it's a global one. COVID-19 has proved that this is a global phenomena. It's a global world, and we need to cooperate with each other. And I think, I hope that the new leadership in America after election will recognize this. And even if the old leadership are back in the position, they will recognize that the fact remains that it's only cooperation that will work for the people of America also, in the interest of the American people. That's what I will add. Thank you.
Thank you, so well said. Now, here is a second question from Ms. Zarina Iqbal, and she has asked, she says, we have learned from the webinar today that the Islamic Institute in Urumqi is doing a wonderful job to enlighten the Muslims. Could anyone share more information regarding it? Would you like to say something, Nisar Memon, sir? Because after you, then I'll add to it, because I visited this institute.
I think Pakistan has a good cooperation with China, and I think the good models, wherever they may be, they must be understood, they must be replicated, and there is a cooperation already going on, and therefore I think question is valid if there is some good model there, because this introduced in the neighbors, in a friendly neighbor. Therefore, I think we should look into it and see what are the things that they have been able to achieve, because we all need that. And basically, the knowledge must bring a situation where people create a learning environment where there is people are against the extremism, because it is the extremism which is what brings the terrorism. And as I always say, that the extremism in all forms and manifestation cannot be acceptable. It cannot be. Even we will condemn the extremism of Islamic extremism. We have seen the ISIS, and we have seen the Hindu extremism of Hindutva, and we have also seen the Israeli extremism of Zionism. So I think in any form it should be condemned, and this will bring the peace to the world. This is what we want. Thank you.
I would like to add a little bit over here, sir.
Please.
I've been visiting the Islamic Institute in Urumqi for the past many years, and on my last visit last year, it was very enlightening because it has moved to a new campus as of 2017. And this campus is actually more modern than probably the universities of Stanford or Berkeley in the USA.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, more important than the campus or the building, we had a very long discussion with its president, Mr. Tayyab, and he informed us that because some of the Uyghur Muslims were being misled by the extremists and by the miscreants on distorting the verses of the Quran and the teachings of the Holy Prophet, may peace be upon him, that and inciting them to terrorism. So to correct this situation, the people who are undergoing studies over there, they are young men who are doing the bachelor's degree, and some of them are doing the master's in Islamic law, Islamic jurisprudence, and Islamic fiqh. And they are being taught the correct version of Islam. They go out and they become the imams of various mosques so that they can correct the people who are being misled by distorted or being presented with half-baked truths, and they are able to guide the Muslims so that they can not be misguided, nor they can be motivated towards terrorism, separatism, or extremism. And I think that's a very important step, that first of all, you do a course correction by guiding the people themselves. That's what I observed over there. Anyway, so coming to a third question, this person, Bill, you may like to answer this if you like. The question is that the policies of the Chinese government in combating terrorism, extremism, and separatism have been successful. The rest of the world needs to emulate some of them. What is your opinion on this?
I think that's absolutely the case. In fact, what policy coming out of the United States today, especially with regard to Xinjiang, is indirectly supporting terrorism. We had reports, for instance, a friend of mine who was a senator in Virginia, state senator in Virginia, who had been to Syria many times and had met with President Assad, was very clear that on the front there were these Uyghur units that were some of the most violent units that were operating there. And of course, the United States has done everything to create chaos in the region, and is still supporting groups opposed to the government of Syria, many of which are including these terrorist groups that are getting support from the West. And so China has really shown the way forward I think in a very important way, because what they did is create development. Look, if you want to make an analogy, when the United States moved to the West, we had, the Indian tribes there. We didn't give them schools. We didn't give them education. We went on a policy of genocide. And this always happens in the movements of peoples and the development of nations, that things change hands. But the policy of China has been very clear, that they really want to bring prosperity to wherever they're going, whether it be the Belt and Road or the internal policies in China itself. And there's a dedication from the top leadership. I mean, you look at President Xi. I mean, he's spending all his time on this poverty alleviation. This is the way to go. And in the United States, we have nothing like that. And in fact, the policies that the attacks that we're making against China are undermining one of the most important partners that we would have to eliminate terrorism, because the elimination of terrorism cannot be done with without the kind of economic development policy that China has practiced in its own regions and through the Belt and Road. And by undermining this and trying to bring China down, which is now happening, all the major Chinese firms are being attacked now, Huawei, Alibaba, and this is a policy really of genocide, not only directed against China itself, but against all the people that China is going to be able to help. And when they don't have that, when you have the poverty, when you have the continued misery, you're going to have expanding terrorism. And so U.S. policy is really more supportive of terrorism than opposed to it. And they do well by talking with China and dealing with China, especially on this issue of countering terrorism.
Thank you, Bill. Senator Nisar Memon, perhaps you may like to add something to it vis-a-vis the province of Balochistan in Pakistan in tackling separatism, extremism, and terrorism.
Yeah, I agree with Bill completely that sooner or later, these great economic powers have to talk to each other and emulate each other's good projects, good policies. And I think in Pakistan, we have been a beneficiary of the poverty alleviation program that we have had for the last 20 years. And I think these are working well. And we also found that continuation of the previous government's poverty alleviation program during the COVID, it helped us. It really helped us to come out of the economic difficulties for the lower middle class people and people who really needed the support. And in terms of the Balochistan, I would go back to what Rom said, that all countries must refrain from exporting anything. And I say this with all the responsibility that even for our country, if any of the leadership at any point in the history of Pakistan have ever done that, then they have brought the difficulties to the country itself. Therefore, I think in Balochistan, we need a lot of development, and government of Pakistan, not only today's, but previous were also committed. But somehow or the other, we were faced with the terrorism. So our focus went into fight the terrorism, but I agree completely with Bill and also with Dave, in fact, he mentioned about it, that we need to have these programs going together because you need to remove the causes of the terrorism, and that's the poverty. If there is the fertile grounds for terrorism, it is poverty. And therefore, we must have these programs included. At the same time, the United Nations need to play a greater role in controlling various countries to implement what they profess, that there will be no interference in the internal affairs. And I think this is exactly what the Balochistan has been, because Balochistan is one very important province for Pakistan today. And it is not only for Pakistan, but also for China, it's for the region, because it is going to link up, and it is linking up already with the Chinese BRI program. If we all know this, CPAC was the first part of the BRI, and it has connected this Urumqi straight on with the coast, and now many other countries are joining in, and this whole thing is spread, not CPAC, but the BRI is now going to Europe. It has gone already to Africa. It has gone to Asia, and even up to Europe it has gone. So I think cooperation is the name of the game for the future.
Right. This is this last question, which is addressed to David. And I hope, David, you're not dozing off because of the time difference. So just to wake you up, this lady, Samina Paracha, she asks, she says that, I think she's misinformed. She says that the Uyghurs, there is a restriction on their travel abroad from China. Do you think it is, there is any truth in it, and would you like to comment on it?
I can't give a definitive answer to that, but there are certainly a lot of Uyghurs abroad. They are largely in exile, I feel. I can't specifically answer that. I'm sorry, I don't really know. I can't see why, because they have entitlement as any other Chinese citizen. So I'm sorry, I'm really not able to give a.
I can add something to it, Dave.
Sure.
I have met a lot of Uyghur Muslims traveling to Saudi Arabia for pilgrimage, and if there was any kind of restriction, those people would not have been allowed to travel. This year, of course, Hajj was limited because of the COVID-19,
Yes.
but otherwise, every year, a lot of Chinese Muslims, including Uyghurs, they travel abroad and there is no restriction whatsoever.
Well, there you are. That's the answer, I think.
Right.
May I?
So,
Hello?
hello. So, Senator Nisar Memon, I would like you to please conclude this session and offer your opinion on the webinar itself and on the topic, and what are your closing comments?
Okay, thank you very much, Group Captain Hari. I think it has been a great pleasure to be among the eminent scholars, eminent writers, and eminent citizens of the world. I have, frankly, this whole day was very productive for me because I learned a great deal, and I'm sure that it must be for the other participants equally, because it gave us some of the missing areas of understanding of China and Xinjiang. We all know what the situation is. We all know the attacks, propaganda that has been going on. However, there were some very positive things that are happening. One may not have learned it in the normal process. So I really thank you for organizing this, because we learned a great deal. I think if, in summing up, I will only say that the facts versus fictions, ground realities versus myth, and research versus propaganda were very clearly exposed during the day. Nothing more need to be said from after whatever has been spoken about. The protagonists of the terror, extremism, and separatism stand exposed by the research, facts, and the cogent reasoning and the policies put in place by the Chinese government for extending the socio-economic benefits from its prosperous east to their west in Xinjiang. And by coming to the west, they have also been able to move forward in the global scene, in the region, and then going to Europe. I would say that China, as a sovereign, independent country of 1.4 billion people, is an area with an area of 9.6 million square kilometers, is strategically spread from South China Sea to Himalayas and Karakoram in Pakistan mountains, connecting the Far East with Central Asia and beyond. In the last century, they have, in fact, allow me to use a very, something that we knew as a child. I knew that China in the last century was known as an opium country during the colonial time, has now emerged to an emerging superpower, especially since the 21st September 1949, when the PRC was made. With strong, how did they happen? I mean, I often think, how did this happen? I think it all happened because of the strong and honest leadership of the masses, which was responded to their vision of a peaceful nation, non-interference in other countries, and patience despite outside interference. And I think Urumqi and Xinjiang is one example, by developing strength within their own society. And this is very important. In order to fight the outside, it is just like COVID-19 has also told us that if you have internal antibody, you have internal strength, then you react, you defend yourself against COVID. Therefore, they have also developed strength within their society by governing by strong systems. And I think this is one example countries like Pakistan need to understand. China has long been, it's not today, and I think every speaker alluded to the fact that China has always been, it is not today. China has been a multi-religious country, and Xinjiang has been as an autonomous country in the northwest of China, lies at the crossroad of the several regions, several civilizations and cultures. Now has multiple religions. We just learned today that apart from Islam, Buddhism is there, Taoism is there, Protestantism there, Catholics are there, and Eastern Orthodox Church. all of these regions are, the religions are also there. And I would say Xinjiang is fully respects, and what we have seen I was reading the white paper that was introduced to me, they fully respect and protect the freedom of the religion and the beliefs of the, as they are stipulated in the constitution of the China. This is amazing. Not many people realize that there is a constitutional provision to protect that, and the citizens have the freedom to believe in any religion, within, of course, in the bonds of the constitution. The speakers have really dealt in detail. In my view, I heard the whole day Pakistani speakers and also global speakers. They dealt in Chinese policies in Xinjiang. I agree with Ram. It is an internal matter, and they have all the right to handle historic Xinjiang province as they deem fit in accordance with the constitution. However, look at their greatness. They allowed all the UN teams, all the outside people to come and see Turkish president going there, United Nations, and many of them were not even allowed to go. So they have opened even then. And I believe that as a member of the United Nations and of the Security Council now, they are well versed with their responsibility. And we should refrain from giving any impression of internal interference in the internal affair. I would say that really, I mean, I will be repeating myself if I were to talk about who said what, but I would just say that there appears to be a three-pronged strategy. The government and the President, she has really taken this, a three-pronged strategy to address the issues in the Xinjiang, and they have been successful. Number one, I think they developed excessively the predominantly Muslim Xinjiang province to avoid giving an enabling environment for socio-economic unrest. And I think all the speakers so brilliantly pointed out the numbers, the figures, and development of GDP and poverty alleviation and number of things of the economic development that they talked about. And the sense of deprivation brings difficulty. Therefore, that was there in the Eastern Europe, Eastern China, and that development was addressed by the projects from the West. I think since 2009, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China has been a wave of unprecedented reforms, if we history look at that, to bring the Uyghurs into the mainstream. So you see, they have been brought into the mainstream. Of course, there will always be more and more to do. So I think the number one was developing excessively. Number two was securing back the normalcy of the area for connectivity with the Central Asia. If this whole area was not secure against the terrorism, and then I think it would have defeated the entire connectivity that Ram talked about. I think that could be only possible when they secured the normalcy so that they could link up with Central Asia, Pakistan in the world for the global peace and development through the BRI project of President Xi Jinping. I think, of course, the CPEC was, we have completed the first phase of infrastructure. Now we are going into the phase two. But much more has to be done within the country, in Pakistan and also other countries. The third one, I think, that I noticed was that while the normalcy was there, they went on to educate. And this is what those centers that people thought are concentration camps. And perhaps people do not realize what the concentration camps were. And they educated the Uyghurs. And on the one hand, they were educating them, giving them the education, not only Arabic education, but their own language was being taught, and literacy was being taught, as we heard from several speakers. But they also dealt with heavy hand, the extremist elements, who were inspired by the foreign systems, elements, and the country. And I think while having done this, securing and then educating and then fighting out and eliminating them, they also have combated effectively the propaganda with documents like publishing a white paper where the facts were distorted, were brought in line with the history, just like East Turkmenistan is one of the elements that have brought up. All these things have also been seen by the president of Turkey, and I think he rubbished it also. I think in conclusion, I'll say Pakistan has itself is experienced the extremism, and therefore we feel what it is to have something like this and its deadly impact on its people, society, economy, and security. We fought back to control and ended it, but it is a constant fight. And since the extremists receive foreign funding and have their sleeper cells still alive, and we have seen that in Afghanistan, in Balochistan it happens even in sometime Islamabad in some form or the other. As such, we really wish China the best in this crisis, which has been imported and sustained from abroad. It is really, if I were to sum up what is this after, I think somebody very rightly pointed out, the wars are over. Now we don't see one country attacking the other, but this is the low intensity warfare. And I think some of the countries still believe in it. And this, they must understand that people understand that this is low intensity warfare of sabotaging the economic interests of a country, replacing the full scale war is now known game, and therefore it will not work. And with these words, I will say congratulations to Group Captain Hali for organizing a day of eminent speakers on the subject. I say eminent because each one of them has, of the speaker, have spent years in and on China, especially Xinjiang. And I learned from Dave in how the entire process he has described the human rights abuses, and also he covered on these United Nations linkages. And Ron, you talked about something which is close to my heart now, is to create the environment programs. And I think this hopefully will implement the Paris Accord, which United States president came out of it, but China and Europe stood by. And I hope that Pakistan, which has contributed least to the environment degradation, has suffered most. I think this will be great if the digital economy is there and smart operations and IT and e-commerce. I think COVID has also proved that you are going in the right direction and the world is going in this. I think Christine also pointed out to all the things that were there. And I think some of the things was that even Pompeo confessed that when he was director of CIA, he said, we lied, we cheated, and we stole. So I think what more can one say? And Bill, you very rightly, with your historic background that you gave, was tremendous. Great power game that you talked about, and also engineering capability that came in, and agriculture development. And the entire thing was the Communist Party brought the parity between the regions. And I think this was fascinating to me, the railroad, Xinjiang with the Eurasia Railroad from 1992. In fact, the Silk Road is years, centuries earlier, the Silk Road was there, and now it's a revival. Let's hope Urumqi plays its own role, and US policies, US, I would say, must review their policies and bring it in line with the realities, with the expectation of a peaceful world. Thank you. That's all I needed to say.
I have your permission to conclude the webinar, sir.
Please, sir.
Okay, so before I thank everybody, just one sentence. President Xi Jinping has undertaken a mammoth task of poverty alleviation, and his goal is to extend the quality of life of every Chinese citizen by 2021 and bring the poverty level to zero, so that there are no poor people left in China. That is really tremendous. And he is properly following, not only for China, but for the friends of China, the Chinese proverb that you give a man a fish, he will not starve for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, he will not starve for life. And that is the philosophy he's following. So to sum it up, I would like to thank you, Senator Nisar Memon, for braving with us both the sessions from morning till late afternoon. And I would like to thank you, Christine, despite feeling a little indisposed, you were with us and your paper was tremendous. Bill, Thanks again,
Thanks to
David
you.
Bromwich, for staying up so late at night. And of course, Professor Urong, you have been tremendous. I would also like to thank our media partners, FM Power 99, who helped us out, especially Mr. Gurmani, Mr. Najib and his wife, Fakhra, and their entire team. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So
Bye.
long.